You said earlier on that you would have taken account of what will happen to consumers, what will also happen to businesses. I would like a practical example. In 5 years' time, when you get all these 16% over the next 5 years, what does that mean for my bill as an individual? Will it double? Let's say I'm paying 500 Rand now. What is the projection?
It actually depends what kind of individual you are and how much electricity you use. Because at the same time as we've put the big tariff application in, for the first time we've put in the application for the tariff structure, which we usually do at a different time. Now we have different pricing for different categories of customers, which reflects the cost of supplying them.
But isn't there a price per kilowatt, a standard price per kilowatt?
There is indeed a standard. There's not a standard price per kilowatt at all. It's very different for different categories of customers. And the way that we've structured it is that for the poorest customers, this is our proposal. The regulator may do it differently, but there is broad agreement that there's a need for protection for the poor and for residential customers who use very little electricity. For the poorest households, we propose that the increases should really be kept at minimal levels, and in this first year of the 5 years, their costs should in fact go down. For low middle income customers, we want to keep the increases to single digits over the 5 years. And but for the higher income customers who have conventional metering and are not on prepaid electricity, the more affluent customers will face not the 16%. It's on average a bit lower than that. But the principle really is the higher the amount you consume, the higher the rate you will pay. And I think that we've proposed a tariff structure which aims to use some of the revenue from very large customers to cross-subsidize the smallest, poorest
because
customers.
The argument in this country has been the other way around, that the smaller customer is subsidizing the bigger customer.
That's right. I think on the face of it, that's what it looks like, because if you take just the price, the bigger customer pays a lower price than the very small customers, but it costs us much, much less to supply that bigger customer.
And
so in fact, we make, if you like, a surplus on the big customer, which goes to subsidize. Because to reach poor customers, you need long lines, you need a lot of networks, a lot of buckies driving around. The cost to supply them is quite high, but they don't pay the full cost of supplying them. There is a cross-subsidy within the tariff structure that comes from big mining and industrial customers.
So when things such as not just generation but transmission and distribution are involved, you find that perhaps the bigger customer is subsidizing the smaller one. Mr. Kenny, let me bring you in. Then you heard what Eskom is asking for: 16%, 13% for themselves and 3% for the independent power producers. Your thoughts?
No, this is much too high. Just a little history. From 1994 to 2004, Eskom didn't build power stations when it was absolutely obvious we had to build them. And they kept the price of electricity artificially too low for political reasons so that they couldn't cover their own costs. And we're now sitting with electricity prices, average sales price around about 61 cents a kilowatt hour, which according to my calculations is enough to cover running costs and to fund the new stations. What Eskom's asking for 16% for 5 years, this would mean the price of electricity would be 128 cents a kilowatt hour in 5 years' time on current value, but on real terms, on present money, it would be 98 cents a kilowatt hour.
From what? From 60 cents?
This is much too high.
This is sorry, you're saying 128 cents from what though?
The average in 5 years' time, Eskom's average selling price on this increase would be 121 cents a kilowatt hour.
And you say it's much too high.
It's too high. That would be 98 cents in real terms. Here's the fundamental thing.
Yeah.
What Eskom should be doing to fund these new stations is funding them mainly on debts, and Eskom can raise debt cheaply and easily. There's a good example of this in Business Day yesterday. On page 2, first of all, is the heading, Dismay as Eskom seeks hefty price increases, and then the heading below that is, Eskom stick with SA bonds despite discomfort. So Eskom can raise debt cheaply, and what you should do is manage that debt responsibly, and then we wouldn't have to pay these high prices.
And that will happen regardless of the downgrades by the ratings agencies.
As I say, there's the heading. We've got the downgrades, and still investors stick with their SA bond. Of course, the downgrades are going to affect us. Eskom is an extremely safe business, risk-free business. Eskom debt is as good as sovereign debt, if not better.
But then again, there's an element of the independent power producers and the renewable energy that's coming on.
This is a very disturbing thing.
Why?
Because because renewables, which usually means solar and wind, are marvelous for a whole range of applications, small-scale applications. But for producing grid electricity, they're a disaster. They're extremely expensive, hopelessly unreliable, and will do more harm than good on the grid. And you can see this in dramatic fashion in Germany today, where they're phasing out their good nuclear power and going on to wind turbines. The price of electricity is soaring. They're having all sorts of problems with the grid, massive subsidies. It's a disaster. Now, that's not Eskom's fault. If Eskom's forced to subsidize these renewables, well, that's just bad luck for all of us.
All right, we'll hear a response from Hilary Joffe, but let me take TP Ntshontsho first, because they've put in 9 billion rand for the very renewable energy projects that you are talking about. If what Mr. Kenny is saying is anything to go by, then Mr. Ntshontsho, you're putting good money after bad projects.
Thank you, Collard. I don't think so. What we should remember is the national intent that the country is pursuing here. All of us agree there's a need to ensure security of energy supply. That has to come at a price because the country needs then to invest in capacity. The country has made a commitment in terms of the integrated resource plan to ensure security of supply by doubling capacity in the next number of years, and in the second instance, committing that a significant portion of that new generation capacity should come from renewable energy sources. As to the expensive side, yes, that's a fact. At the moment, we know that the technologies that are being deployed are still, from a cost comparison basis, still higher than the coal of producing from traditional sources. But what we have seen from the bids that have happened over the past year is that the prices of these units of electricity, the bids that are coming through, there is a downward trending in the price that is being proposed by the various bidders. That is on the cost side. But yes, in relative terms, it is high.
And it's understandable. But what about examples such as the one cited by Mr. Kenny of Germany and what the renewable energy projects have done?
No, I have a different experience. I mean, I spent time in Austria and in Greece, where more than 80% of the energy supply in those countries comes from renewable sources, particularly hydro and solar. And depending on the management of the national grid and so on, and Eskom are there, they can talk about this. It is very feasible to manage the technical supply aspects of the grid in such a way that there is a reliability in the system.
Right, let me bring in Cornelius then. There are two elements. One, I would like you obviously to comment on the prospects of the renewable energy and the ability to assist us where we're looking for this stability of supply going forward. But broadly, talk to me about this point of raising debt cheaply and easily in the market, and that Eskom shouldn't be coming to us.
Well, I think to start off with the renewables topic that's been raised now, I tend to agree that the renewables costs are really very high compared to what we could potentially do with coal or with nuclear to some extent, although there are some hidden costs in nuclear during decommissioning, etc., that has to be weighed in as well. And we have to use the strategic resources that we have. At the same time, we have to agree that the energy that we are using in the form of coal as a finite resource is not sustainable, and we have to find a balance in introducing renewables. So there is going to be a cost burden on that side, and we have to make sure of it. I just want to comment on what Andrew said earlier with regards to Eskom not starting the build program in time. And I think that there's a lot of misperception around Eskom's ability to make decisions around when they build and exactly what they build. Because in 1998, Eskom indicated to Parliament that new power plants need to be, the construction thereof need to be started urgently. And at that stage, government decided that it is not necessary for Eskom to start a build program. And obviously we saw the repercussions in 2007 when we had a major shock in the system as a result of aging power plant and not sufficient maintenance being done. At the same time, I think from Eskom's side, we cannot fault the company for trying to remain financially in a position where indeed they can sustain their operations. And hence, the company at this stage is trying to prevent a scenario like what we have with SAA, to go back to government every 3 and 4 years and say, look, we are at a point where we could potentially be collapsing. We need subsidies. We need some sort of a bailout from you at this stage. And electricity is the backbone of the economy. Without reliable and affordable electricity, we're certainly looking for severe troubles, and
that's where the point, and that's where the problem is, though, Cornelius, that you're talking about reliable and affordable. So if we take this 16% suggested now over the next 5 years, what will it do to the competitiveness of this economy?
Well, Zolani, for many years South Africa was marketed as a very cheap electricity destination. And unfortunately, the worst impact of these increases will not be on the residential side, it will not be on the agricultural side, it will not be on the commercial side, it will very much be on the industrial side. As Hilary has indicated earlier, the industrial side is already subsidizing residential end users to a large degree, and the cost that they carry is significant. In many cases, the operational costs that they carry in terms of electricity pricing is in excess of 30%. So doubling that over a 5-year period is going to be hugely detrimental. But at the same time, this is creating opportunity. We have to deregulate the electricity industry to an extent where industrial power producers can actually produce for themselves. We have to look at feasible ways of wheeling electricity, in other words, using the grid that is there to distribute the electricity from where it is produced, from private power to where it is ultimately used. And I think in those areas we can make the biggest improvements, and not necessarily saying that 100% needs to be generated by Eskom and that we should not be deregulated.
All right, Andrew, I'm going to ask you to respond in a minute, but Hilary, for instance, the point made by Andrew that Eskom should be going back to the market. You can raise debt cheaply and easily. You shouldn't be coming to us.
Let me say first that what we've done in this application is we have put all our costs out there as transparently as possible, because it's not our decision to make. This is Nersa's decision. We are very fortunate in having a strong independent regulator who has a very extensive public process. So our aim has been to empower people to engage with this application by providing, I hope, as much information as we can. And we do encourage people to participate. But going to this question of debt, which also if you look in our document, you will see the full details. Debt isn't free. It has to be paid for. As we all know, with our home loans and all the other debt we raise, we have to meet the cost of interest, and ultimately we have to pay it back.
Yeah, but so Andrew is suggesting that Eskom is a safe business and it will make profit and pay the interest back.
Well, yes, but part of the tariff application is a provision for paying that interest. As I said, I think we have already 180 billion rand of debt on our balance sheet, which has been raised from a variety of sources, local and international, the World Bank, local development funders, including the DBSA, export credit agencies. That is going to double almost at one stage in the next 5 years as we complete our build program. We have to pay the interest on that debt, and ultimately we will have to repay that debt. And we need investment-grade credit ratings to make sure that we can access the markets and that we can access them at cost-effective rates. At the moment, Eskom does not have an investment-grade rating on its own.